thank you everybody, obviously, for joining today. Nice to have you all here and appreciate you taking your time out, obviously, to listen to what we've got to talk about today. I'm going to start with a bit of an introduction to Creed Comms because I know, Jack, you've just given us a fantastic intro there, but there might be a lot of people on the call today who haven't heard of us. Whilst I'm going to save Jonny and I's personal introductions to a little bit later for good reason, just to quickly cover off who Creed are and what we do. So we're a talent comms agency based out of Altrincham in South Manchester, and we cover primarily all things employer brand and talent attraction, but also do an awful lot of work with employee experience and media strategy as well. So that's where you'll often see us popping up. We've partnered with IHR for probably going on 10 years now, and speak and attend lots of their events as well. So hopefully you will see us kind of covering all aspects of what we do today and how data and research impacts all four as well. So before I do introductions, I'm going to start with some kind of rhetorical questions. And now, whilst I can't see everybody on here today, kind of think through this in your head. Would you buy a house if you didn't view it? Would you buy a wedding dress without trying it on? Would you buy a car without giving it a test drive? I'm going to guess most of the answers to that are no. And the reason I'm kind of bringing that up is my instinct would say that there are people on this call who potentially, not definitely, bought media without knowing if their audience actually uses that particular channel, potentially developed creative, including an employer brand, without knowing if it's relevant to your target audience or audiences, and maybe built a careers website without knowing if it appeals to your audience as well. They're just examples, but just to kind of give you a bit of an insight into, we think investment needs, consideration. Ultimately, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, research is really, really important before you make any kind of significant investment. And I think it was important to kind of correlate those two things. So when we're thinking about data and research at Creed, we're kind of quite versatile in how we use it. And I think it's really important that we talk about this through lots of different lenses. We use it in many different ways here. So today you're going to hear us talk about how data and research can be used across talent attraction. And I'm glad in the poll that attracting diverse candidates came up as probably the biggest challenge that the people on this call are facing in earlier on, because we've got some specific case studies to talk about how research and data has helped with that. I'm going to talk about how data and research is used and then can benefit you and can be measured in employer branding. And then Jonny's also going to take you through something called Creed Talent Insights, which is a much broader kind of research offering or opportunities that Creed have as well. So that's what you're going to see today. Creative will kill me because I decided to put an elephant in the presentation today, as in the elephant in the room. But what about tech and AI? We get asked this question all the time by clients, basically, which is, yeah, research sounds great, data sounds great and stuff, but can't AI do a lot of that heavy lifting now? Can't tech just do it for us? And it certainly has a place. It certainly has a place. We use both tech and AI in lots of what we do, but it certainly doesn't replace the primary things that we use. And it certainly isn't great when you ask it to create our images to introduce ourselves today, giving it some prompts. So we are going to introduce ourselves, but making the point here that tech and AI don't always get things right. Yes, this is a bald guy wearing a suit, and this is, you can see Jonny. It does bear a striking resemblance to Jonny, in fairness, but this is not actually us. This is us, and you can see it got it fairly close, but not quite right. And I suppose that's the point with research and data, that we really want to get this right and it needs to be accurate. So quick introduction, everybody. I'm Dave Walstow, Associate Director here at Creed. I've been in employer branding and talent attraction since 2008. I've known nothing else, this weird and wonderful world. So hopefully today we'll have some interesting insights to share.
Hello, nice to meet you all. I'm Jonny, been at Creed 10 years, and I also started out in this industry in 2008. So yeah, I had a little bit more hair when I started out. I think Dave did also. So yeah, nice to see you all, meet you all today.
I'm not sure I did. Okay, so technology, as we've just kind of covered off, it certainly makes things easier. and rightly so, and it definitely gives us shortcuts. However, our audiences or your audiences that you're trying to reach, I mean, in whatever capacity that might be, aren't daft. They will know if things aren't authentic. They'll know if things aren't relevant. You will all of yourselves know when you're starting to see AI generated images or content, things start sounding the same. You've probably all seen the LinkedIn posts that have got the emojis and that are paragraphed in a certain way, or the hands on images and stuff that don't quite look right. And I know that's more using kind of visual AI, but people spot those things, and it's important that we don't ignore that fact. And I think, how are you going to be able to stand out if your competitors are using those same kind of shortcuts? Whether that's an employer branding, talent attraction, opening a new branch or store, whatever it might be, it's about how do we stand out. Now, interestingly with this, and I'm going to go on a bit of a slight aside using Pokemon cards, but bear with me, there's a point to this. I was reading a book recently, or an audio book from a guy called Michael Easter, on a subject called the scarcity brain. And what the scarcity brain basically says is us humans, don't particularly like getting out of our comfort zones, but more importantly, if we're given opportunity to do something that has unpredictable rewards and can be repeated quickly, we will fall into that loop in many different aspects of life. So rather than using gambling as an analogy, which it is, I'm going to use Pokemon cards because my son's quite into Pokemon cards. You've got the opportunity to buy the cards. You don't know what's going to be inside them. If you don't get the card that you want, you can repeat it and keep going until you get whatever you need to do, or don't potentially get what you need. And I think there's a lot of synergies in our world. Probably everyone can think, if they're using job boards or different, well, not name but anybody by name, but there are certainly platforms out there that give you the opportunity to have unpredictable rewards. Are you going to get that perfect candidate? If you don't this time, can you throw a bit more money at it, get a few more clicks, get a few more applications, maybe get the perfect candidate? And it's very easy to fall into where should I advertise and add a little bit of extra money and hope to get that perfect candidate or whatever it might be, without really thinking, are we targeting the right people? Do we know that this is where those candidates are? Are we using the right creative? Are we saying the right things? Are we leaning on our correct propositions and all that kind of stuff? So I think it's trying to break the scarcity loop, as it's called. And I thought that was an interesting kind of tie-in. So teeing up the kind of the bit that Jonny is going to take you through next is, we hear from our clients and partners really often that these are some of their challenges that we're hearing more and more of, and certainly more since the budget, obviously, and the year that we're looking to kind of move into. And you've probably all seen a lot of the polls out there at the minute in terms of what hiring needs and etc. are looking like, and budget cuts. But we've been asked to do more with less. Our costs for things increasing, but returns are diminishing. There's always this fear of getting out of your comfort zone. And maybe if I do something different and spend the budget on insight, research, data, is that taking it away from my active channels where I know I'm going to get applications of some form or a response of some form, and it's kind of breaking that cycle? Is there a fear of that? And is there an ever increasing reliance on active media channels as well? We're seeing more of that across our client base, which is unless we're having that conversation to prove the worth of data, insight, and research before you kind of spend externally. I think natural instinct is to spend more and more on those active channels. So hopefully some of this resonates with some of you today, and if it does, hopefully we'll have some solutions or ideas to talk you through. So thank you very much. I'm going to mute and hand off to Jonny.
Morning all. As Dave mentioned, I'm just going to talk you through some of the principles, and we've got three kind of ideas and examples that we're going to talk you through as well. So if we think about where to start with research, a bit like starting with a blank piece of paper, if you've got to write a big piece of work, be quite daunting, can be quite terrifying. So a good way of approaching it that we look at is, there are three kind of sources or areas that you can get data from. And especially for everyone here, I would say you're on data. Don't immediately start looking outside because you will have lots of rich sources of data from your own organisation. So you'll have your own proprietary data. There'll be data from the market, things like ONS, Indeed Market Insights, Horsefly, that sort of thing, that aggregates macro information that you can very easily see how the entire UK or different countries globally market looks. And also the really important thing as well, what do candidates think and want? So 3 areas to get data and information from. And I suppose the important thing is there isn't a platform that covers all 3. You can't just give a big load of money to someone to aggregate that for you. There's a platform that already exists. And the key way to look at it that we would recommend is to focus on the problem rather than the platform first. So that's the first place to start, and think of it as a bit of detective work. So classic bit of problem solving. What is the cause of the problem first? What do you think it is? What data can you get? What evidence can you get to prove or disprove that it is the problem? What conclusion can you come to? And ultimately, what are you going to change? If you're getting data, how can that impact and influence what you're going to do moving forward? So that's a kind of principle, and it's a bit abstract as a way of looking at it. We've got 3 separate ways that we're going to talk you through in these 3 separate areas. So Creed Talent Insights is the name that we've coined for our proprietary bespoke research offering that we do for clients. We've got a particular talent attraction approach around DEI. So it chimes quite well with what Jack was saying at the start about that being the #1 challenge for the audience on this call. Just talk you through some principles of approaching that and how we define and create employer brands and use data. So they're the 3 elements we're just going to talk you through. So I mentioned about starting with the problem and not the platform, which is how we always start. We have access to a number of different platforms that enables us to pull that information together, that when we've got a defined challenge, we can approach that and draw down from any number of these platforms if we need to. So Creed Talent Insights is the name of the offering, and things that we can do include but are not limited to things like what's your competition doing, where are they spending money, what audiences are they targeting, what channels are they using. We can do that. What do your audience think about you and your competitors? What are their motivations, where they're going to look for jobs? We can send surveys to find that out direct from candidates. What audiences should you be targeting? What personas, what audience segments are most important for you to be focusing on to get the really best candidates? We can help with that. And then there's a couple of different ways that we can investigate specific geographical locations, whether it's for widening reach, focusing on specific locations that clients might be opening a new branch or depot or office in. So there's just some examples that might hopefully resonate with some challenges that people have. We've got a specific example which is going to briefly run you through for Lidl that we did last year, where they approached us with a challenge they had in Doncaster, struggling with attraction and not quite sure what the problem was. So is it because there aren't enough candidates? Is it the wrong kind of candidates that they need that are in the local area, or is it a problem of awareness? And as I said, they knew anyway that there was really big competition. So we started to look into a number of different platforms to bring the local market to life. So understanding the context is really important. So in this situation, something I find interesting that we found out, there is such a thing as a golden logistics triangle in the middle of the UK. So this is where 90% of the UK can be reached from within 4 hours of driving. So all the big logistics firms operate here, and apparently it's expanded, and Doncaster is the tip of that triangle. So that's really important to understand or contextualize what sort of challenges there might be in the market. So when we started to look at the types of audiences and roles that there are, unsurprisingly, roles that are kind of more relevant for logistics were over-indexing. We saw kind of officey and specific skilled roles were sort of lower index against the national average. So big number, how many people do this job in the local market, and what does the general audience look like? So we knew going from the start that the general audience that they're looking for definitely exists in the local market. Then we looked at the competition through some of the platforms we've got. We can see what the market share, for want of a better phrase, of the audience is. Where do people work? How does that split down across the different across the location? We could see here it was actually quite fragmented. You can see there, you could probably guess who the big logistics player might be, but the share of the market was not actually, it surprised me that it was not as big as I thought it would be. So we can see it's relatively fragmented. And then when we looked at salary, we obviously know what the client pays. We can benchmark the average in the town, in the sort of region and across the country. So we can see where they benchmark against them. Lots of other things we had in the report, but just they're the kind of top line things. And the key thing here, put together an action plan. This is how we change our attraction strategy based on everything we've learned, talk the client through it, and implemented changes based on what we found out. Okay, so I'm just going to pass over to Dave for the second example.
I think I'm mute now. Where we click me on Jonny, actually. So as I mentioned before, jump back up one actually. We great that from a polling standpoint, DE&I attraction, or at least attracting diverse applicants, that came up quite high. Thought that possibly might be the case, but I think it also reflects the kind of the conversations we're having with a few of the organisations we support, and I think those organisations may be on this call as well. So I better not do a disservice to how I describe these next two things. But initially, if I start out with G4S, so first of all, before I actually get into the examples, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn when I say, when we often get approached by our clients, the first thing we often get asked is, in a situation like this, and this applies to all different types of talent attraction, but attracting diverse audiences are no different. The first question is often, where shall I go and advertise? It's the channel that we should go to. So should I go on diversityjobs.co.uk, or should I go on Women in Technology, or whatever it might be? The first thought is often, where are the candidates going to be for me to put my job advert on? And the way kind of, I suppose, we in Creed approach these things is that's almost the third thing to consider. We will talk about audience message channel quite a bit. We'll talk about, right, well, who are your audience? Where are they? What are the propositions that are going to resonate with them? What are they looking for? Why are they looking for that? Then what's your message? So let's, what's your offering? What are your propositions? Why are you a great employer for that particular type of candidate, etc. Let's build some messaging, some creative, and then think about where we execute that advertising, creative, etc. And make sure we're saying and doing the right things to the right people before we go and spend quite a lot of money. And that's going right back to the beginning of the presentation, which is any significant investment should have some research beforehand to make sure that you're putting your money in the right places, particularly as budgets tighten. I mean, that's true all the time, but particularly in the kind of the market we're moving into. So for G4S, this was kind of middle of last year. Started speaking to their head of there, and just kind of, it was almost a throwaway comment in a meeting that we had, a conversation that just said, yeah, 9% of our frontline stewards and security staff are female. And we were like, what, why? And, when you actually look into the kind of events that G4S's frontline stewards and security personnel kind of cover, yeah, there's kind of men's football games, etc. But then there's concerts, there's female football games, there's all kinds of different things, and just absolutely made zero sense why the percentage of females working in that role was so low. And we were just like, right, how can we work together to try and change this? Because that's there's just no reason that that should be the case. So we went on a bit of a mission to kind of, to challenge that stereotype and to try and break that trope that it's just men in high-vis jackets working in football stadiums. So the research that we did for them, short of getting into results, which was kind of in the activation of it all now, but we spoke to females currently doing the job. Why did you join? Why do you stay? What do you love? What do you hate? What's the pull for you? And we kind of get that rich data from the people actually doing the job. It's not rocket science, but it really works. Their female at G4S, their CEO at G4S is a female. We interviewed her, got all the aspirational elements of why should somebody come and work in this role? What's the direction of the business? What's the sell from your perspective? Why would you encourage women to get into this role? And she gave us some great insights as well. So that was fantastic. And then we've built out an entire creative and messaging campaign that was labeled Insecurity. And that's created into a hero video, loads of digital assets, etc., etc., and that's being rolled out now. So they had their starting point. They know where they want to get to in year two, or sorry, at the end of the first year, ready for year two, and that's what we're working through with them at the minute. Similarly to Northern, albeit if the person that I think's on this call today, we've only literally just started doing this work. We're kind of in the middle of it at the moment. Requirement very, very similar, which was again increased female representation, primarily in front end roles, challenging the long held incorrect kind of perception that the rail industry is just for men and it's greasy overalls and all that kind of stuff. It's not, clearly. And actually, Northern's starting point was, I'm not saying it's good, but it was significantly higher than where G4S were at 25%. And there's a target to improve that kind of after a year by doing this piece of work by 5%. Seems only a small percentage, but actually as a percentage, it's significant. And that would be a huge, huge success for Northern. Very similar approach for us. Got a methodology of speaking to people frontline, people speaking to people in head office, all of which are women, obviously. And then their MD and people director are both ladies as well, spoke to them and again, got that kind of aspirational direction of why. And it's helping us now develop a creative concept to take to market to encourage more female applications and hopefully then join us as well. So kind of in terms of this, just my thoughts in terms of how you approach any kind of talent attraction, but in this case, it's D&I kind of attraction. Have a clear purpose and a plan. You need buy-in clearly from a budgetary standpoint. And, whilst D&I, I'm just going to keep mentioning this because obviously it came up in the poll, has been dropping down some people's priority lists over the last kind of 6 months. I know it's kind of triggered in the States and it seems to kind of be, landing in the UK a little bit at the moment. I think there's arguably a time to double down or to really consider it in specific areas where you think it'll benefit your organization. Don't rule it out. Know your numbers. Both those organizations know where they were starting from and where they want to get to. I think that's really important because ultimately, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So don't do it for vanity. Don't do it because, it's ticking a box. Do it because there's a real reason, there's a real purpose, there's a business buy-in, and you really want to see a dial move for the right reasons. And I think with that, insight can really help. Right, back to you, Jonny.
Okay. So the third of the segments that we're just going to talk you through, employer branding. As Jack said in the intro, we're one of the UK's leading employer branding agencies. It's what we live for. We absolutely are so passionate about doing it. And a lot of my job is spent on how do we improve it each time we do it. So we're just going to talk you through a very whistle-stop overview of how we approach it. So there's 4 ingredients to a brilliant employer brand. It's about being relevant to the motivations of your audience and what they think of you and your competitors. It's authentic to the experience of working for your organization as your people see it and experience it. It differentiates you from your talent competitors, both in potentially what you say and how you say it. So if you're all saying similar things, how do you say it differently? Really important. And it's aspirational to the strategy and the goals of where your business is going to and where your leaders are taking. So it's future focused. and getting the balance right between those four elements is really important. So that's the first thing. Data underpins everything that we do for employer brands. I touched upon surveys previously. We do surveys internally and externally when we do employer brands. We've heard from engineers, vets, and dental nurses all within the last 12 months. And you might think there's lots of things that would separate those, but one thing they have in common is we test 12 propositions, 12 reasons why people join, stay, or perform at an organisation, and ways people effectively to score them and rank them. And security was the most important thing out of those 12 for these three separate audiences. And specifically for engineers, that was global. It was in Japan, it was in USA, it was in Italy, Germany, Poland as well. So thing to consider here. And for this next section, we're just going to have like a lot of things at the bottom, that things you can consider actioning in your own roles. So don't overlook the fact that either your organisation, sector, or jobs are appeal and are secure, and that will really appeal if you promote that. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but here are some areas that you could and can measure success in doing employer branding. So lots of different things. As we'd kind of touched upon previously, it's all around what is your problem or opportunity? What's the challenge? What are you trying to achieve? And before you start the work, measure where you are, and then you can see where you're going to, and you can measure your success. So the principles of what we taught you through, and I'll have 3 examples. It's about problem first, or opportunity first. Where are you starting from? What data can you gather and or create that is relevant to you? Not just taking something off the shelf. How can you create it for your circumstance? Things that matter, and how are you then going to apply them to your own challenges? Okay, so they're the principles. And Jack mentioned at the start, we did some research towards the back end of last year, 1,000 UK job seekers, and we asked them about 30 different questions. It's all on the report that can be downloaded afterwards, but I'm just going to talk you through a handful of these stats now. So what did we find out? So those 12 reasons why people join, stay, or perform, we asked the audience to rate them in terms of importance. And as you can see from the numbers here, lifestyle, which is how we coin work-life balance, level of flexibility you can get in your role, that type of thing, that was more important than rewards. So again, don't overlook something and think, if you can't win on rewards, how can you position your work-life balance offer to make it more appealing to your audience? Another thing we wanted to find out for all our clients, how challenging is it to convert candidates? How loyal are those candidates? Once you get an application in your ATS, how loyal are they? So it was quite staggering actually what we found. So 41% of people would keep on not just speaking to other employers, but after they've accepted a job, they would keep applying for other jobs. And 31%, almost a third, have accepted a job and then declined it after getting a counteroffer from their existing employer. So the key here, the key thing to bear in mind is, are you keeping those candidates warm, excited? What's the experience for them? Because you need to build in resilience for your offer until they basically walk through the door on day one. Okay. Also wanted to identify how long candidates stay in a job. And what you can see here, only 8% typically stay in a job for 1 to 2 years. The best candidates, you would think, the most experienced candidates, are likely to be settled in an organisation. So how are you going to make them someone that's been in an organisation 5 or more years, that might be the perfect candidate? To get them to join you, you need to give them a strong reason. this was also another stat I found really quite surprising. What percentage of the candidate market in general do you think are active at any one time? 9%. So if you think in the UK, there's about 34 million people in the job market, 9% are active at any one time. So just think about all the money you put on active channels, generally, you're appealing to 9% at any one time. So you need an approach for looking at people that are not active right now in a strategic way. Okay. And how quickly do candidates expect to hear back from you? So building on from the loyalty point previously, wanted to find this out. Over a third of people wanted to hear back within 3 days. So if you think of an application being made in an evening, when you get that application the following day, that's already kind of 1 day on your day zero. So almost 90% expect to hear back within a week. So how quick are you getting back to candidates? They might have moved on. Really important to think about. So that's a bit of a whistle stop in terms of what we've got in the report, and there's more in there. I'll just hand back over to David.
Hi again, everybody. Right. So basically, yeah, just wrapping up now. If kind of our 3 key takeaways, I suppose, for this presentation, because I think we are coming up to time, is if you can break the scarcity loop and scarcity brain, as we kind of called it earlier, the getting off the hamster wheel, as it were, and breaking the cycle of maybe doing the same things and hoping for different or better results, or could you be using the things that you're using better if you knew a little bit more about the audiences you were targeting or the people that you were currently working with? We have definitive data that shows if you invest in employer brand and attraction and with research and insight before you then go and kind of develop creative or go and advertise, your money will work harder. You will need to spend less money on attraction because of doing that initial bit of research and insight up front. And most of your competitors, again, just from speaking to people in the sector and our own client base, etc., most of your competitors won't be doing this stuff. It's because it's kind of breaking that loop. Not many people are actually doing it. You've all got, I'm sure everybody on this call who you may or may not be doing it already, but have very busy jobs. You've got a lot of different things to juggle that don't just kind of hang around attraction or employer branding, but there's a day job to do as well. But I think for those people who can give this a bit of time and thought, you'll kind of reap the rewards, and most of your competitors certainly won't be doing this in our experience. Just to literally last slide, 2 QR codes on here. I think the QR code on the left is for the full report that Jonny just took you through. So if you want to see all the different questions that we asked and the responses to those, if you can feel free to take a snap of that. And on the right-hand side, just a link to our website as well, which we are updating, by the way, at the moment. That'll be done in April, but our current site is just on that QR code on the right. So just first of all, well, finally, I should say, I suppose, from Jonny and myself, a massive thank you. Appreciate so many people taking out so much time to listen to what we've got to say today. Lot to cover. Hopefully you found it useful. In all the different aspects of how you can use data and research, and some examples of how we use it for some of the organizations we support. But we are more than open to any and all questions if there are any. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys. Really great session there. That was super insightful. So really appreciate you taking us through that. I did see, just quickly before we go, I don't think the QR code, one of the QR codes might have been broken. I don't think it was working for the report, or for a couple of messages in the chat. So we'll get that sent out to you. We can make sure that we get that in the follow-up email or something like that. We can get that through to everybody there.
We'll update the link. I don't know why that would be the case, but apologies, everybody. We can update. We'll get that QR code updated as well, and send out the link to it as well.
Cool. All good. No worries. Thank you very much. So yeah, just before we get stuck into a bit of Q&A, we have had a couple of questions come in, which I'm really excited to be able to get stuck into. We are going to just get some feedback from you all from a Slido poll. So that should be launched imminently. And again, it's going to pop up on your right-hand side in the pop-up. So please do share feedback, thoughts, and really good to be able to understand what you guys want to learn more about so that we can deliver the best sessions for you going forward at IHR. So please do make sure you take a bit of time to fill that in. And while that is just coming in, we're going to tee up with a bit of a Q&A. There are a couple of questions I've seen coming in. So while that all warms up nicely, I'm just going to tee up. I did have a little look through the, when everybody registered for this webinar, there was a question asked of what is the single most important question or challenge you'd like to answer, and I always like to have a little quick flick through to see what some of the trends are that everybody on this this webinar really wanted to take from that. And while whilst the Q&A is warming up a little bit before we get to the audience Q&A, I just kind of wanted to pose one question from that, which I found as probably the most striking one, and the one that was repeated more so than any of the others, in terms of kind of the data and the importance of that. How do you find it best kind of communicating that with decision makers? And I suppose kind of taking the data that you've got, being able to develop that and as I say, present it and communicate it to a wider team, stakeholders, decision makers, any of these kinds of people. What would you kind of suggest of how best to kind of take the data they've got and report on that?
Jonny?
Yeah, slight delay. Hello. Yeah, as you may have guessed, we're sat in the same room. I think the really important thing here, and the way we approach this with clients, is what's going to matter to those decision makers. So, for example, is there any element of your people strategy or business strategy that has metrics aligned to it? And how can you kind of work back from the goal? If you think of those decision makers, what do they want to achieve? What are they going to open their budget for? How can you work your way back from there? So there might be an element of, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there might be an element of your people strategy that is around a certain audience. What metrics can you get that is going to appeal to that? So it's all about getting data that applies to a people strategy or a business strategy and working your way back. Don't know if that's if that entirely covers it, but that's the approach we would do when we're thinking of working for a client. And where can you get that data from? I think there was a question as well in the chat. Some of the data is about aggregating things from focus groups and understand that, but things like attrition rates, exit data, why are people leaving? Think about the key audiences. In most organizations, there's probably one or two audiences that either bring the money in or do the work that the company exists for. So those ones, there's going to be, you might not know it and it might not even be shared through the organization, but there's data that you can find around how you get those people to join and what stops those people from leaving.
Perfect.
And I'm just going to add to it really quickly, but I just say it's maybe a slightly different answer. But I think sometimes in terms of getting the buy-in in the first place, a lot of work we've been trying to work on. I've been looking over here a little bit. We've had our creative director, and we've been looking at the organisations that have done research and insight to develop creative. We've seen a 50% reduction in how much they need to spend on advertising, and I think how I'm answering your question there is, if you're able to go to senior people within the business to say, actually, look, if you can do this bit of upfront work, which I know is not going to directly get you applications or something immediately, but in the short term, well, the medium to long term, it's absolutely going to reduce costs, then I think that's a really compelling argument to take to the business. So I think that's probably how I'd answer part of your question, Jack.
Absolutely, and I saw a couple of kind of questions, similar questions coming in the chat about which data to report on internally and things like that. And I think that kind of highlights, as you say, it's what matters to the business, it's what matters to decision makers, and that's what's key to be able to really focus on in the first instance. So thank you for kind of sharing that. A similar question just on the survey while we're there was Gemma asked kind of were the 1,000 job seekers from a particular industry, or was it quite a kind of broad, varied audience?
As Jonny is our survey maestro, I will let him answer that one as well.
Yeah, so it's a representative sample of the UK adult job seeking market by location, age, gender. So basically means that anything we get from there is representative of the market at large. We didn't go into there's on the report, I think we've got a page or two that details all the different jobs that people do, but there's a huge volume of variant. There's some, I think we had like about 120, 150 in healthcare. There was a three-figure number for retail as well, but I think we had people that agricultural labourers and all weird and wonderful things. We didn't want to be specific on specific audiences because we tend to do that for clients. They'll say, right, we struggle with care workers or nurses or doctors or whatever. So we do specific there. We went broad here. And yeah, the detail of how broad is in the report.
Well, thank you very much. Cool, good, great insight. And as I say, there'll be tons more info in the report, which I know that the link's been shared in the chat now, so you guys can go and check that out to be able to check out the full thing. It looks like some really cool data sets. So yeah, looking forward to kind of having a flick through that. Thank you very much. Question in from Adam around kind of employee advocacy and using current employees from diverse backgrounds to advocate for the business or roles you're trying to recruit. And Adam was just after any tips on the best way to get that content out for maximum engagement, videos, blog posts, etc. Any kind of insight on that?
Yeah, and interestingly and ironically, I'm going to answer this by taking a step back from the where we should and what we should, to go back a step and kind of say, if you think about the two examples we gave with G4S and Northern's probably a good starting point. Don't put anything out there. So right, I'm trying to think how I best use this example without using it as a direct example. Don't post things about, let's use females for example. Go out with loads of marketing materials from females within the business. If you're G4S, for example, where you've only got 9% of people currently in post doing that, and then so you're setting an expectation that's inauthentic. So then somebody will join that organization potentially as a female and anticipate that there's lots of other females working there, and immediately that's you're going to have retention potential issues there, or a feeling of inauthenticity as you've joined that business. So I think there's got to be a real sense of what's the message that you're trying to tell. And in both of those instances, for those organizations, it's about we're on a journey to try and improve where we are because we appreciate that we're behind where we need to be. And there's no reason that we are. So we're on this, we want more applications from whatever that background is because, or that demographic is, because of these reasons. So in terms of then what you then do, well, that depends on the sector that you're in, what you're trying to achieve and why. But I think, yeah, well, if you have got people that are willing to be on camera and do testimonials or days in the life and all that, of course, that's going to be great. Making sure that you've kind of got a reflective photo base and videography base on your careers website and on your social media channels, etc., is also very useful. I just think make sure whatever you're doing is just authentic to where you are. Just talk really honestly about where you're trying to get to and why. I think the why is the really important thing. So less about what do we do the bit of thinking first on what, what's our purpose here in the plan.
Yeah, I guess it kind of falls back down, get the foundations right, and then you can build on that.
Exactly, because there's loads of cool ways you can get that out then live. That's that's the fun bit, but it's getting the hard bit done at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point there at the start as well about kind of making sure that it's relative and as you say, you're not kind of trying to kind of influence candidates in a way where you're trying to tell a story that isn't quite accurate. With using that, you want to be able to find that balance and make sure that everyone knows it's that kind of project side of things and growing on that side as well.
Exactly, and then you can again. You can get into a mire there if you're talking about employee referral as well, because if obviously you've got a certain bias of having more of the people that you don't want, obviously if you go heavy on employee referral programs, is there a risk of getting more of the same types of people? So you've got to be really careful about how you think about that. There's a lot to consider. It's all absolutely doable, but it's a case by case, I think, is how I'd describe that. No two business same.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate that. I think we've got time quickly for one more question. I've seen one from Tom come in on the Q&A. It's around struggling for kind of qualified candidates through job adverts and mainly using kind of LinkedIn. Just kind of looking for a little bit of guidance, really. Tom's asked kind of, would you invest more time and resource into potentially directing sourcing candidates proactively? I know we kind of alluded to that a bit in the webinar session, or investing more time into improving the adverts and their visibility. Have you got any kind of personal thoughts on
Oh, I
what you
do,
there?
and I could bore Tom senseless on this one. This is one of my passion subjects. So thanks, Tom. Great question. Well, they've all been great questions, but um, if it was up to me, I think you need to be splitting budget now 50-50 into passive advertising to passive candidates and 50% into active. We have irrefutable data on the amount of reduction again in active channel spend required if you have built your employer brand or role based, whatever it might be, in the months leading up to when you have the burst of recruitment, or if it's just an always on passive advertising kind of attraction strategy. People knowing who you are, where you're based, what you do, the types of roles you have available, how they might suit that particular candidate, even if that candidate's not looking, doing that research again of who are the demographics of people that we reach, where are they based, what are their motivators, what might pull them away from their current employer, and just having base level, always on passive job advertising in the background with no real obvious call to action has made, like I say, irrefutable changes to the amount of money some of our biggest spending job advertising kind of clients have had to spend in that area. You wouldn't believe the difference it's made, and it's a lot more interesting type of advertising. It's just not job postings and job ads, and you are relying on that 9% of people to make a search for your exact job title on the right platform at the right time, and you're running into low chances of people finding your advert. Whereas if you're in front of the right people all the time, that's where I believe you'll get your wins. But again, need to do that research, know who they are, where they are, what they're interested in. Thank you very much.